With that stuff out of the way, guys, let's move on now to our fourth email today. And our fourth and final email today comes to us from Rafael Estrada, who writes, "Hey, John, greetings from Rio." Well, greetings, Rafael. So yesterday at the Aquaman premiere, Jason Momoa was asked about Henry Cavill leaving the role of the Superman. And here's what he surprisingly said. "I just talked to Henry. He's absolutely not leaving the character. He loves the character. He's not, 100%. Do you think that Jason Momoa really knows what he's talking about? And if so, why Warner Brothers did not simply put that in their statement?" All right, so for those of you who don't know what Raphael is talking about, a report has come out that Jason Momoa, while on the carpet, I believe he was on the carpet for Aquaman, and he was asked specifically, I don't know why a reporter asked him about it, but specifically a reporter asked him about, so what do you think about Henry Cavill leaving as Superman? And this is what, as Raphael just put in the email, this is what he said. He said, he's absolutely not leaving as Superman. He loves the character, and he's not, 100%. The reporter asks again if Cavill's exit is happening. Momoa once again responds, no, it's absolutely not. Now, before we jump into that, this statement from Jason Momoa contradicts two other statements. One from Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers has already said publicly, we have no plans for another Superman movie at this point. I mean, that's just what Warner Brothers said. The studio that makes these decisions, they said, we have no plans for another Superman movie right now. But this statement Jason Momoa made also directly contradicts another statement that Jason Momoa said just last week. Because just last week, he said this. He goes, if they're both out talking about Cavill and Affleck, then listen, it's just the place they're at in their careers. I mean, how many has Henry done? He's done like 3? Yeah, I mean, like, you want to move on. So Jason Momoa making this statement completely contradicts what he said last week and completely contradicts what Warner Brothers said the other day. I want to propose here, Robert, that there is another option here that I think we might be interpreting incorrectly. And I think one of the options here is that Jason Momoa is talking to Henry, and does Henry want out of playing Superman? And he says, no, he loves the character. He wants to be Superman. But Warner Brothers is saying they got no plans for Superman. You hear these comments from Jason Momoa, Robert. How do you interpret this, and where do you think things stand?
Well, here's how I feel about, look, Batman and Superman are the crown jewels of the DC universe. Now,
not according to Warner Brothers, apparently.
Well, right. Well, there's always going to be talk. Yeah, there's always going to be talk about making a Batman and Superman film. The problem is we've seen Batman and Robin was the worst of the worst comic book movie probably ever made. So you see how these things can go horribly awry. Now, here's what any actor and what any studio wants. They want a great script and a great filmmaker they can get behind. What I'm hoping for is I think Chris McQuarrie should direct the next Superman film with Henry Cavill starring. Now, this is not, I have no information at all, but do you think that the brass at Warner Brothers hasn't thought of this? They're coming off of Mission Impossible Fallout, which was a huge hit worldwide. That's an obvious choice. You know, you've got a world-class filmmaker in McQuarrie. He's already won an Oscar for screenwriting. And you've got Henry Cavill that the studio likes. They've had a great relationship with him, even though Man from U.N.C.L.E. didn't do as well. But he certainly played ball with reshoots on Justice League. For all accounts, he's a very affable, he's a nice guy. If they come up with a filmmaker and they come up with a script, I wouldn't be surprised if we get an announcement out of the blue that there's going to be a new Superman movie that is fast-tracked and made very, very quickly, because they need that to happen. You know, these other films, Shazam, Aquaman, that's great. Wonder Woman 1984, awesome. But if Aquaman works, it shows that you can go off the deep end and still make a movie that is technically in the DC universe and have it make money. So they don't necessarily have to have a Superman movie now tied into Wonder Woman and Aquaman and Cyborg and The Flash. I think if they have a great script and a great filmmaker, we might hear that it's going to happen. I'll bet you one way or another, we're going to hear something about a Superman movie in 2019.
And you know what? Well, there's a couple of things there. It's interesting you brought up Christopher McQuarrie. Here's the thing. A couple of months ago, I think it was about 2 months ago, Christopher McQuarrie actually got on social media in response to seeing, the toxic nature of like the Star Wars fandom at the time. Things have quieted down quite a bit, which is good. But,
yeah.
And Christopher McQuarrie basically said, people ask me about possibly directing a Superman movie. Forget it. Like Christopher McQuarrie's already come out publicly and said, I've got no interest in being in this superhero realm now because the fandom there is just way too toxic. I don't want anything to do with it. So, hey, have we heard directors and actors say things before that they then later backtrack? Sure, and maybe that could happen here. I, however, unfortunately, really believe Warner Brothers has already decided. I think Walter Hamada has already decided they've moved on from Batman and they moved on from Superman. Specifically, they've moved on from Ben Affleck's Batman and from Henry Cavill's Superman. I think what you've got is a situation where Superman, as much as Henry Cavill, and I know people say this is sacrilegious to say, Henry Cavill is my all-time favorite Superman. More than Christopher Reeve, even. Henry Cavill, to me, is my Superman. I love Man of Steel, all that kind of stuff. But the reality is, the reception of this Superman character, as portrayed by Henry Cavill, has been incredibly divisive. A lot of people didn't like Man of Steel. A lot of people didn't like Batman vs. Superman. A lot of people didn't like Justice League. And I think Walter Hamada, and Aquaman really reinforces this belief in me. I think Walter Hamada has made the decision to move on from certain things. And I'm not doubting we're going to get another Superman at some point, but I don't think it's going to be Henry Cavill, regardless of if Henry still wants to play the role. I don't think they have any plans. And that's why, because when Warner Brothers was asked about it, if you've really got plans for something, you want to keep people hyped and excited about a character, and somebody brings it up, you don't say, we've got no plans for another Superman movie. I mean, you just don't say that if you want to keep interest in that property and that character going. So I want you to be right. I want you to be right in this, Robert. I really do. But I just don't think that's the way they're going.
I will say this, it's been a long time since I've worked at Warner Brothers, but I did work at Warner Brothers for a couple of years in feature production. And I know this, nothing ever stops being discussed within that studio. They have scripts. Speed Racer, maybe not the best example. I love the Wachowski Speed Racer, but they tried, when I worked at Silver Pictures writing coverage on scripts, I read 3 different versions of Speed Racer, and that was back in the early 90s. And of course, they didn't make Speed Racer until the late aughts, 2000, when did it come out? 8 or 7 or something? Almost 15 years later. They never stopped developing scripts like this. So I'm hoping, if it's not Cavill, like you said, I think we haven't seen the last of Superman. Whether it's Cavill, I don't know. But I think it'd be nice to see him get his due, because I think people like him.
I do. I know I do. So I don't know. We'll have to just kind of leave it at that, I suppose, and let's see what transpires, because I would love it if Henry Cavill came back and played Superman again. I want that so bad. I just don't think it's in the cards, but let's see how it all turns out. All right, guys, that'll do it for all the